Having said this, let me move straight on and see what happens to the individuals who live in ideology, in a determinate representation of the world whose imaginary distortion depends on their imaginary relation to the conditions of existence. In other words, in the last instance, to the relations of the production and to the class relations. I shall say that this imaginary relation is itself endowed with a material existence. An individual believes in God, duty, or justice. This belief derives from the ideas of the individual concerned, from him as a subject with a consciousness which contains the ideas of his belief. In this way, by means of the absolutely ideological conceptual device thus set up, the material attitude of the subject concerned naturally follows. The individual in question behaves in such and such way, adopts such and such practical attitude, and, what is more, participates in a certain regular practices which are those of the ideological apparatus on which depend the ideas which he has in all consciousness freely chosen as a subject. If he believes in God, he goes to church to attend Mass, kneels, prays, confesses, does penance, and naturally repents, and so on. If he believes in duty, he will have the corresponding attitudes inscribed in ritual practices, according to the correct principles. If he believes in justice, he will submit unconditionally to the rules of the law, and he may even protest when they are violated, sign petitions, take part in demonstrations, etc. Throughout this schema, we observe that the ideological representation of ideology itself is forced to recognize that every subject endowed with a consciousness, and believing in the ideas that his consciousness inspires in him and freely accepts, must act according to his ideas, must therefore inscribe his own ideas as a free subject in the actions of his material practice. If he does not do so, that is wicked. Indeed, if he does not do what he ought to do as a function of what he believes, it is because he does something else, which, still as a function of the same idealist scheme, implies that he has other ideas in his head as well as those he proclaims, and that he acts accordingly to these other ideas, as a man who is either inconsistent, or cynical, or perverse. In every case, the ideology of ideology thus recognizes, despite its imaginary distortion, that the ideas of a human subject exist in his actions, or ought to exist in his actions. And if that is not the case, it lends him other ideas corresponding to the actions that he does perform. This ideology talks of actions. I shall talk of actions inserted into practices, and I shall point out that these practices are governed by the rituals in which these practices are inscribed, within the material existence of an ideological apparatus, be it only through a small part of that apparatus. A small mass in a small church, a funeral, a miners' match at a sports club, a school day, a political party meeting, etc.